Hey guys, tonight we're slipping behind the velvet-draped doors of medieval castles. Not to sip wine or waltz in candlelit ballrooms, but to live the nightmare no one tells you about becoming a princess. Picture this. You're 10 years old, barely tall enough to peek over the windowsill. Outside, the village hums with life, muddy streets, market calls, and the clatter of hooves. But inside the cold stone walls of your father's keep, a servant whispers that your betrothal has been sealed to a man thrice your age, who you've never met, and he rules a land you've never seen. Congrats, your princess training begins now. And know you, Prabab, Lee won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're tuning in from and what time it is. I love seeing how far this sleepy little history club stretches. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It always started young. If you were born into a noble house and your parents had titles even a notch above the lowest rung, then your future was already being plotted before you could walk without stumbling. Forget games. Forget deciding what you wanted to be. You were a bargaining chip in silk slippers. Your mother, likely hardened by her own journey through the cruel labyrinth of royal life, would have begun drilling you early. Posture. Silence, composure, never speak unless asked, learn the Psalter, practice embroidery till your fingertips bled, not because it was pretty, but because that's what was expected of a pious, dutiful wife. You were a product in refinement, and every tiny mistake, a sneeze, a stutter, an awkward shuffle in court, was a stain on your value. You'd grow up watching your brothers ride, hunt, wrestle, and laugh freely while you sat stiff on a stool for hours, your hair being pulled into the tightest braids. It wasn't vanity. Hair was a symbol, long, clean, and tucked properly under a veil meant purity, discipline. If your hairline was too low, it would be plucked back with tweezers, not for fashion, for obedience. Around age 7, the training deepened. You were removed from the nursery and either sent to another noble house to be raised as a lady-in-waiting, an unpaid apprentice in womanhood, or kept close to your mother's side where you'd watch her navigate the silent war of the court. Every curtsy, every folded hand, every glance was a calculated move in a lifelong chess game where the queen often fell first. You'd learn not just needlework, but heraldry, family trees, and how to recognize when someone was lying behind a smile. If you showed promise, meaning if you didn't faint at the sight of blood or flinch during a thunderstorm, you'd be deemed suitable for marriage alliances by the time you reached the ripened age of 12 or 13. And just like that, a letter would be penned, your hand offered, a name signed beneath yours. Perhaps your father's seal stamped with a flourish, while you sat staring at your reflection, knowing you had no say in any of it. What was your dowry? Land, cattle, a distant claim to some title that would determine who you'd be sold to, yes, sold. There's no gentle way to phrase it. If you were valuable, you might be matched with a foreign prince, which meant being packed off to a foreign court with unfamiliar languages, unfamiliar customs, and a lifetime of pretending you belonged. And if you weren't valuable, if your father was poor in land but rich in ambition, you might be wedded to some aging warlord with scars on his hands and dark things in his eyes. It wouldn't matter. You were his property the moment the contract was signed. You might think the wedding would be the happiest day, but no, it was a performance. Layers of velvet and gold weighing down your tiny shoulders as you walked stiffly beside a man you barely knew. No tears, no fear, Everyone watched you like a hawk. Any sign of protest and you'd bring shame to your entire house. You'd kneel at the altar, vow to obey, then be led still a child into a chamber, lit with too many candles where the real terror began. Princesses didn't get honeymoons. They got consummation ceremonies. Your sheets checked for blood. Witnesses stood outside. You smiled the next morning even if your bones ached. You were praised for bravery. But inside something quiet had shattered, and no one would ever ask how you felt. Being a princess wasn't about tiaras and banquets. It was about alliances, breeding, and enduring. The court was a place of whispers. You couldn't speak too freely, or rumors would sprout like mold. You couldn't eat too heartily, or you'd be called gluttonous. Too thin. Then you were sickly. If you smiled too often, men assumed you were foolish. If you were clever, they called you conniving. You walked a tightrope, and one wrong step meant exile, or worse. Sickness haunted castles like ghosts. You'd pray feverishly each night that the cook hadn't poisoned your stew, that the damp stone walls wouldn't breed another bout of the flux. Every cough in the hallway felt like a threat. And when the plague did come, because it always did, it didn't matter how royal your blood was. You'd watch maids collapse, knights go pale, priests tremble. And if you got the buboes, you'd be locked away to die quietly alone under a wooden cross, painted in charcoal above your door. Even without the plague, childbirth was its own slow execution. By 15 or 16, you'd be expected to bear heirs. Not just one child, many. Princes wanted sons. Stillbirths were your fault. Daughters were a disappointment. A woman could die after her first labor, and people would call it an honorable death. As if that made the agony worthwhile. So yes, girls feared becoming princesses, because behind every coronet was a cage. Behind every velvet curtain, a shadow. There was no freedom, no rest. Just a never-ending performance where the applause meant nothing, and the silence was often deadly. You'd learn to smile anyway, because what else could you do? You were born into it, raised for it, expected to carry it all without complaint. And your story wasn't unique. It was repeated across kingdoms, names changing, faces fading, but the pattern never breaking. And so we begin. You're standing in the corridor now, hands clasped, staring down the hallway of your future. Cold, gilded, unforgiving. The princess life waits, and there's no turning back. The corridor is silent, except for the low hiss of torches flickering against the stone walls. You can hear your own breath, shallow, unsure, and the distant echo of voices from the great hall. You've just turned 13, and already your childhood feels like a dream someone else had. At this age, most village girls are helping churn butter or carry water from the stream. But you're being paraded like livestock before visiting nobles who nod and whisper about your hips, your skin, your teeth. You don't understand half of what they say, but the way their eyes linger tells you more than words ever could. You want to run, but you can't. Your slippers are too tight. Your corset cinched too cruelly. One misstep, and you'll faint or worse vomit, and that would ruin everything. For your father, for your family, for the careful plans inked out on parchment months ago. You're not just a girl. You're a future duchess, a potential queen, a womb with a throne attached. Tonight, you're being inspected by the emissaries of a distant count. He's 52. widowed twice, known for hunting wolves with his bare hands. You tried to smile when they showed you his miniature painted likeness, but the tight-lipped line of his mouth made your blood chill. Your mother said nothing, just handed you a new veil and reminded you to speak in soft Latin if they asked about religion. These men don't want laughter or joy. They want submission tied up with a bow. As they sit at your father's table, you remain standing behind your chair, posture perfect. A doll of flesh. Your hands are numb, the blood trapped by gloves that never quite fit. You've learned to keep your eyes low, not because you're shy, but because looking directly into a nobleman's eyes can be taken as a challenge. And you know better than to challenge anyone. You've seen what happens to girls who do. Earlier today, your governess found you crying in the solar. Just a few silent tears as you clutched your old doll, a tattered thing with threadbare curls and a crooked smile. You hid it quickly. Dolls are for children, and you're no longer allowed to be one. She patted your shoulder once, then reminded you to apply rose water to your wrists. You mustn't smell afraid, she whispered. But fear isn't a scent, it's a weight, one you carry behind your ribs every hour you're awake. And when you sleep, that's when the real terror begins. Dreams of wedding chambers, of blood-stained sheets and leering old men, of being taken far from home and never seeing your sisters again. The chapel bells in your dreams toll not in celebration, but warning. But let's imagine just for a moment that you survive the match, that the emissaries nod approvingly, that the Count accepts the alliance. Preparations begin immediately. Your days fill with fittings, dowry inventories, and endless Latin prayers. The priest blesses your betrothal with oily fingers. Servants whisper behind doors, speculating whether you'll die in childbirth before 18. It's not cruel. It's just common odds. The castle transforms into a bridal machine. Seamstresses arrive with bolts of imported fabric, none of it comfortable. Your gown must impress, not comfort. Stiff brocade gilded laces, sleeves so long they drag on the floor. When you move, it's not walking, it's gliding. But not like a swan. More like a puppet on strings moved by duty and expectation. Your hair is oiled and combed for hours. Your nails scraped clean until they bleed. You're told to avoid strong cheese and garlic to preserve your breath. Every inch of you is curated for the moment when you kneel before your future husband and recite words you barely understand. Consent, they call it. But you didn't write the script. Finally, the day comes. You are mounted on a horse for the procession to your new home. You don't cry. That luxury was taken weeks ago. Instead, you sit as straight as you can while your thighs burn and your back aches. The road is long and pocked with ruts. You pass peasants who stare openly at your party. One child waves. You want to wave back. But princesses don't wave at peasants. The castle of your future husband is larger than your father's, but colder, less familiar. As you ride through the gates, the stench of wet stone smoke and old meat hits you like a wall. You will learn this smell well. You will learn every draft, every creak of these walls, because this place is no longer a destination. It is a sentence. He is waiting on the steps, broad-shouldered, gray-bearded, with a scar that cuts across his temple like a mark from God himself. He nods once as you dismount, and though his voice is kind, there's no softness in his eyes. You curtsy low, keeping your knees from trembling. Later that night, he will tell you how young you look, how he will break you in gently. You will nod, because you have no idea what else to do. Your chamber is not yours. It is where his last wife died in childbirth. The maids don't speak much English. One hands you a bunch of dried herbs to place under your pillow. For strength, she says. You thank her, but the words feel like stones in your mouth. The wedding night comes. You are laid out on a bed bigger than your whole nursery back home. Candles blaze too hotly. Your heart pounds in your ears. He enters. You brace. The rest is a blur. In the morning, the sheets are inspected. The blood is seen as proof not of pain, but of virtue. You are praised, fed sweet buns and spiced wine. Your new husband kisses your forehead and tells you you've done your duty well. You lie still, your body screaming, your soul hollow. Over the next few weeks, you learn the rhythm of this new life. You rise early. You are expected to pray at dawn, attend court, smile at visiting knights, and accept every flattery like a statue carved from marble. Behind closed doors, you must satisfy your husband, even when you feel sick, even when your stomach churns. Especially then, because sickness may mean pregnancy, and that's your real job now. You stop writing home, not because you don't miss them, but because there's nothing to say. No words to explain this aching quiet that wraps around you like chains. This is what it means to be a princess. Not gowns, not tiaras, but duty, submission, and silence. You begin to forget what laughter sounded like, or how it felt to run barefoot on grass. Your every step is measured, every glance weighed. And when you see a girl in the courtyard, a servant free to dance in the rain without scolding you, look away quickly before envy catches in your throat. The rain taps against the window panes like tiny fists, each drop a reminder of the world outside. A world that continues to move while you remain trapped in ceremonial stillness. It's been 6 weeks since your wedding, and already your body is changing. Your ladies in waiting whisper to each other, their eyes flitting to your waist with barely concealed anticipation. You've missed 2 cycles. The midwife confirms what they've all suspected. You're with child. You're 15. The announcement brings joy to your husband's court. Trumpets sound. Servants scurry to prepare extra firewood and woolen blankets. You are seated more reverently at banquets, now surrounded by steaming dishes you no longer have the stomach for. Every morning you wake with nausea coiled in your throat like a living thing. Your skin tightens, your ankles swell, your back screams with aches. But no one speaks of your pain, only your duty. The precious lineage inside you. The whispers change too. Will it be a boy? Let's pray for a strong heir. She's still so small, do you think she'll survive it? You are no longer spoken to, only about. Every room you enter feels colder now. Maybe it's your body adjusting, or maybe it's something else, something deeper. A cold that settles in your spirit. Because you know what's coming. You've heard the stories. The noblewoman who bled for 2 days before she passed. The duchess whose baby came feet first and tore her apart. No one hides the risks. They just downplay them with thin smiles and God willing. Your own mother had 7 children. Only 3 lived. She never spoke of the ones lost. Just stared into the fire with hollow eyes whenever childbirth came up. Now you understand why. Your belly grows. Your world shrinks. You are no longer allowed to ride, not even in the enclosed garden. You walk slowly twice daily, watched by 2 maids and a priest. You are fed boiled meats and watered wine. No spices, no excitement. Your books are removed, too stressful. Your embroidery needles taken away. You must rest. But resting when done in silence feels more like being buried alive. One evening, as you lie in bed, cradling the slight swell of your stomach, a maid brings you a silver crucifix on a chain. From the Lady of Montfort, she says. She lost her 3rd babe, but the next came healthy. You thank her. You wear it. You pray. But deep inside, a voice whispers, this isn't about faith. It's about survival. And survival here has always favored the quiet, the obedient, the lucky. The day comes with no warning. You wake in the early dark to a slow, pulsing ache. At first you try to ignore it. Maybe the baby is just shifting. But by mid-morning, you're on your knees sweating, clutching the bedpost, while a wave of pain rips through your spine. The chamber fills with voices, maids, midwives, your old governess whispering prayers. Your husband waits elsewhere. This is not a place for men. You scream. You can't help it. It feels like your body is being torn from the inside out. Blood runs down your thighs. You see stars. For a moment you think you're dying, and you might be. But then a cry. A high, sharp, furious cry. They lift the baby up, show you a wiggling, red-faced boy. Your heir, you did it. But you're not done. The afterbirth tears you again. The bleeding doesn't stop. For hours they press cloths to your skin, whispering Hail Marys with tighter voices. Someone slips a bitter tincture between your lips. You sleep for 2 days. When you wake, you're weak, pale, changed, but alive. They call you blessed. You carried your husband's legacy safely into the world. You should feel proud. Instead, you feel vacant, as if something was taken from you and replaced with a crown you never asked to wear. You are celebrated, honored at court. Your son is baptized in gold-threaded linen. The bishop blesses him as the future of the realm. You are given a sapphire ring and a feast in your name. Musicians play. But you sit still, sipping broth, smiling politely all the while, knowing it will happen again and again, until your body gives out, or your spirit does. Motherhood in the castle is not nurturing, it is political. You are given a wet nurse because nursing is deemed beneath your station. Your son is removed to a nursery where trained servants will raise him. You visit daily, dressed in courtly robes, speaking softly to a child who does not yet know your scent, your warmth, your voice. You are a mother in name but not in practice. And your husband, he is pleased. You've done your duty. He now spends more time at hunt or in council. You see him at meals in the chapel, and when necessary, in your bed. He expects another child soon. You nod, smile, pretend not to feel the flinch ripple through your chest. But in rare moments of solitude, when the ladies are dismissed and the chamber is quiet, you allow yourself small rebellions. You hum lullabies from childhood. You reread psalms you memorized years ago, lingering on verses about sorrow and endurance. You speak aloud to the empty room, imagining your voice echoing beyond the stone. You begin writing again secretly. tiny scraps tucked into books under cushions. Thoughts, questions, even a poem. One line you write over and over, I am seen but never known. And then a letter arrives. Your younger sister is to be married soon. She's 13. She writes with trembling joy, unsure of what's ahead, but certain that if you survived it, she can too. You weep reading her words, not because you're proud, but because you can't warn her. The letter you send back is gentle, full of prayers and empty encouragements. You feel like a traitor. But what else can you do? Every princess is a mirror. And you see your reflection in every girl who follows after you. Pale, decorated, doomed. So you prepare for the next birth, the next feast, the next mask you must wear. Because being a princess isn't a chapter. It's a role that never ends. The seasons roll past your chamber window like waves you're no longer allowed to touch. Another winter blankets the courtyards in frost. Another spring sends up lilacs and the cries of lambs. You are 17 now, and your second child is due in a fortnight. This one has been different. The weight sits lower in your belly, the kicks more erratic. The midwives whisper that it could be a girl. They try to sound neutral, but you hear it, the hesitation, the hope it isn't. Because while sons are blessings, daughters are burdens. They need dowries. They must be taught to kneel, to sow, to suffer, and above all, to repeat your path. You know already what it means to be a mother of a girl in this world. You are both her protector and her warden. The labor is harder this time. It lasts longer, bloodier. The midwives don't say it aloud, but you can see it in their eyes. They weren't sure you'd make it. But you do, just barely. And in your arms they place a daughter with hair the color of candle ash and eyes like stormlight. You name her something soft, something from a psalm. And though your body trembles and your bones ache, you hold her longer than they tell you to, as if your touch might shield her from all the things you couldn't escape. You're allowed to nurse her once, just once, before they take her to the nursery. It's not proper for a lady of your rank to feed a child from her own body, not when wet nurses are paid and waiting. You protest gently. They shake their heads. You are a princess. There is no room for milk and lullabies. Your duty is elsewhere. The court celebrates again. Not as much this time. Daughters don't call for feasts, but you receive a new gown, and your husband gives you a carved brooch of mother and child. He seems fond of your daughter for now. You notice, though, that he hasn't once held her. Your time between pregnancies is short. Too short. The physicians warn that your body needs rest. Your husband disagrees. By 18, you've conceived again, and again. Your body becomes a battlefield you no longer command. Every year, a new swell. Every year, a new risk. You begin to lose track of how many times you've bled too long, of how many names you whispered into the dark and then never spoke again. You start to understand why the older women at court always look tired even when they're dressed in rubies, why their smiles are practiced and tight. They were princesses once, girls with songs in their throats and flowers in their hair. Now they're survivors of a war no one wrote down. Your children grow mostly without you. The boys are taught Latin and swordplay by tutors, The girls are taught to sit still and lower their eyes. You see your eldest daughter trying to mimic your posture, your calm. She is 5. And already she knows that being loud is dangerous. Sometimes when no one is looking, you visit the nursery alone. You sit in the rocking chair and watch your children sleep. Their breaths are soft and even. For a moment it feels like peace. But always the moment ends. A knock at the door. A summons. A duty waiting. Court life grows more treacherous. Your husband's allies are shifting. There are rumors of a distant cousin with a claim to his lands. You begin attending more councils, not to speak, never that, but to listen, to learn. You memorize who nods and who frowns, who avoids your gaze. You know that one day when your husband is gone, your son will be too young to rule alone, and someone must protect him. You start writing again, this time not poetry, but records, lists, letters, copies of treaties and dowry contracts. You keep them hidden behind a loose stone in the chapel wall. Knowledge, you realize, is the only power you're allowed to have. And it may be the only thing that saves your children one day. One night during a banquet, you watch a young noblewoman from another court enter the hall. She's newlywed, dressed in embroidered velvet, her hair looped in golden rings. Everyone admires her. But you see it, the stiffness of her hands, the forced smile. The way her eyes dart like a bird looking for an open window. You know that look. You wore it once. After the meal, you find her in the corridor alone, adjusting her sleeves with shaking fingers. She startles when you speak, then curtsies so deeply her knees pop. You place a hand on her shoulder and say only this, and you can. Write everything down. She nods, and in her eyes is a flicker of something you'd nearly forgotten: solidarity. Not friendship, not safety, but recognition. A quiet knowing. Years pass. You are no longer called young at court. Other girls are now being married off. You watch them from the dais with a strange mixture of sorrow and relief. You no longer have to be chosen. You're already spent. You hear that your sister, remember her, was widowed before 20. Her husband died of a fever. She was left childless, penniless, and shuttled back to your father's crumbling estate. No one wants to marry a widow without property. Her letters are different now. She doesn't speak of dreams, only of harvests, of debt, of silence. You write her back enclosing a small purse of coin. You can't send help openly. Your husband wouldn't approve. But you still remember the girl who wrote to you in joy. You owe her this much. You grow more careful in public. Your every move is watched, not because you are loved, but because you are powerful. The wife of a ruling noble, mother of heirs, your words matter, which is precisely why you must speak less. At night, you lie in the same bed you were brought to as a girl, the same bed where you gave birth, where you bled, where you wept. You trace the grooves in the canopy above and wonder who will sleep here after you. And still, every now and then, you catch your reflection in the polished brass mirror. You barely recognize her. The girl who once wore flowers in her braid is gone. In her place is a woman armored in velvet, draped in titles, surrounded by servants, yet utterly alone. And you wonder, not aloud, never aloud, how many other women are asking the same question. What might have become of me if I had not been born a princess? The candle flickers as you sit at your writing desk, hands folded over parchment that remains blank. It's late. The castle sleeps. And in this rare hush, your mind begins to turn again. Not toward courtly matters or children or obligations, but toward the ghost of yourself who you were before this life claimed you. There's an ache in your chest that never quite fades. It's not pain. It's memory trapped in muscle and bone. You remember being 10 running barefoot across the battlements with your younger brother shrieking as the wind caught your cloak. You remember laughing. You remember not yet being watched. But now every hallway has eyes. Every word you say is echoed, weighed, whispered. You've learned to hold your expressions like a veil, smiling without joy, nodding without agreement. Because your survival depends on ambiguity, on being agreeable without being weak, assertive without being threatening, present but never fully known. Your children are growing fast. Your oldest son is now 8, and already his tutors refer to him as my lord. He rides beside your husband, small but proud, his spine straight with expectation. You watch him carefully. He is bright, too bright maybe. You see the shadows creeping in. The way the other boys mimic cruelty in their games. How servants lower their eyes around him. You take him aside one day and speak softly, asking him to remember that power is not meant to frighten, but protect. He looks up at you with confusion. But I'm a man, he says. Men rule. Men take. And you realize in that moment how deep the castle's teachings run. How early the poison is poured. So you begin again. Quietly. Carefully. You meet with his tutors. You alter his lessons. You teach him the Psalms yourself in the evenings. He rolls his eyes at first, but he listens. Sometimes late at night you hear him humming a prayer in his sleep. Your daughter is 5. She already knows to curtsy, to hush, to smile at strangers. You catch her crying once when her embroidery knots. You sit with her, help her undo the tangle. She says she wants to be like you, and you almost break. Because that means she doesn't know, doesn't see, or maybe she does, and still chooses you because you're the only woman she sees with power, even if it's made of shadows. You begin hosting more gatherings for noble women. On the surface, they're simple luncheons or saints' feasts. But beneath that lace and laughter, something else is growing. Conversations, shared glances, hushed stories passed between sips of wine. The older ones know. The younger ones listen. You speak of childbirth, herbs of inheritance, loopholes of ways to delay a betrothal through canonical protest. You are not planning rebellion, but you're planting understanding. You begin to correspond with other women beyond your own walls. A widowed countess in the East writes to you about her late husband's debts. A young marchioness sends poems with sharp little lines hidden among the rhymes. A nun from your childhood abbey encloses a sermon draft that burns with quiet defiance. It is a thread, thin and trembling, stretched across the kingdom. A network of women who speak softly but think deeply, who endure but do not forget. Your husband, growing older, now seems less attentive. His hunts last longer. His council chambers fill with younger voices. He doesn't notice the shift, the way you've become central in the court's quiet rhythms, the way ladies seek you out in the chapel, the garden, the corridors, never overt, never obvious. But they come. because you are no longer just a princess. You are a compass, a keeper of secrets, a witness. One day, a young noblewoman arrives at your court, wide-eyed and newly married. You recognize the look fresh from the altar, still smelling of rosewater and fear. She tries too hard, laughs too loudly. You take her walking in the orchard and ask if she likes pears. She says yes, but that her husband says they're bad for the womb. You say nothing, just pick the ripest one and hand it to her. That night, she leaves it untouched on your doorstep, wrapped in silk, with a note that simply reads, "Thank you for not laughing." You begin collecting these small moments. A glance, a hand squeeze, a letter. Not to record, but to remember. Proof that behind the rituals, the gowns, the endless masses and ceremonies, there is still a heartbeat in this life. And yet the weight remains. Every month your cycle returns with less regularity. You are 24 now, and your body, worn by pregnancies and fevers, is changing again. A physician murmurs the word barren. You pretend to be grateful, but you know what it means. If your husband tires of you, if he sees your womb as empty, you may be put aside, sent to an abbey, or replaced by someone younger, more fruitful. So you remain useful, politically sharp, diplomatically indispensable. You advise subtly with a quiet tongue and clear eyes. You keep the peace among your husband's fracturing vassals. You mediate disputes between barons and bishops with grace. They call you wise. But you know what they mean. They mean safe. There is a safety in being invisible. But only for so long. Rumors begin to stir. A new nobleman at court. Young, charismatic, eyes like the sea before a storm. He watches you too closely, speaks too boldly, offers flattery that tastes of honey and poison. You are careful, you smile, but you do not play. Because one slip, one word, one misplaced hand could unravel everything. And so once again you remember your place, and remember what happens to princesses who are too clever, too beloved, too visible. You dream that night of running through the woods. No crown, no corset. Just the sound of leaves crunching beneath your feet. You wake with your heart racing, hands clenched, eyes wet. And you whisper to yourself the words, almost prayer, stay still, stay sharp, stay alive. By 26, you've learned to master silence so completely that it becomes its own language. You speak in glances, in pauses, in the way you lift a goblet or lower your lashes. You've learned when to let others believe they have power, when in fact you've already guided the conversation like a stream bending around stones. It is a skill forged from years of necessity, a quiet rebellion against the loud machinery of male ambition. Your husband's health begins to wane. Nothing dramatic, just the slow fraying of a body that once ruled rooms with presence alone. His voice becomes thinner, his appetite dulls. He spends more time in the solar with thick blankets and stronger wine. The physicians come and go. They call it the weariness of age, though he is only in his early 50s. You know better. You've seen what life at court extracts from men. Indulgence, arrogance, and finally decay. With his strength fading, your position sharpens. Your word carries more weight. You are consulted on estate matters, land disputes, marital negotiations for minor nobles. You're no longer just the Duchess consort. You are steward, interpreter, strategist. But power in a woman's hands is always watched. You feel it in the way the stewards stiffen when you correct their figures, the way younger knights squint when you speak Latin as fluently as they do, the way the bishop raises his brows when you ask pointed theological questions. You do not lash back. You smile. You nod. You let them think they are clever for underestimating you. Your children, too, sense the shift. Your eldest son is 12 now, tall, brash, prone to long speeches and short patience. He mimics his father's walk, his father's voice. You worry. Not because he is bold, but because he doesn't yet know the cost of boldness. One evening you find him berating a page boy over a misplaced boot. You take him aside not with anger, but with steel. You tell him the story of your father's servant, the one who lost his position over a spilled cup and starved through winter. He listens, quietly, then asks, "So I must be weak?" You shake your head. No, but you must know the weight of your footsteps. That night he apologizes to the page. You do not praise him. You let the moment settle, because real virtue needs no applause. Your daughters, meanwhile, are entering the tender, dangerous age of betrothal. You've done what you can to delay it. Claimed illness, poor harvests, diplomatic uncertainty. But the letters come anyway. Noblemen seeking alliances, fathers offering sons, lords eager for a piece of your lineage. You read each proposal with clenched teeth, not because they're ill-suited, but because they are all the same. Different names, different crests, same bargain. You know you can't keep them forever, but you can prepare them. So you begin your quiet school. In the mornings you take them walking through the chapel cloisters. You ask questions, not just about saints and psalms, but about alliances, succession, territory. You teach them to see the world not as a fairy tale, but as a chessboard. You show them maps. You explain why one river is more valuable than a dozen rubies. You let them speak, and when they falter, you do not correct them with a slap, but with a better question. One day your middle daughter asks why women must always marry men they don't choose. You pause. The air between you sharpens, and then you say, "Because they fear what we'd build if we could choose for ourselves." She nods slowly, and you know she understands more than her years suggest. In the evenings you read to them old texts, Roman law, tales of queens who ruled when men faltered. You do not call it rebellion, you call it wisdom, and they soak it in like thirsty roots. But even as you sow these seeds, you feel the tension mounting beyond your household. Whispers of war. A neighboring nobleman claims your lands once belonged to his great-grandfather. His petition reaches the king. Your husband is too ill to travel, so they send you. Your first royal audience. The journey is long and cold. You travel with a retinue cloaked in officialdom, but the truth is clear: you are a woman riding into a den of lions. The king's court is grander than yours, gilded and bloated. The nobles here are sleek and smug, dressed in silks, while the peasants starve outside the walls. They greet you with polite surprise. A duchess, here to speak of land and law. Surely a man would have served better. But you bow. You smile. And then you speak. Carefully, clearly. Citing charters, bloodlines, treaties signed before their grandfathers were born. They try to interrupt. You do not yield. And by the end, The king, sharp-eyed and slow to trust, leans back and says, "The Duchess has teeth." To which you reply, "Only when cornered, your grace." The matter is postponed, not resolved, but not lost. And as you ride home, the cold wind biting your cheeks, you feel something unexpected pride. Not because you won, but because you stood. You entered the lion's den, and you left with your name intact. Back at the castle, your children swarm you with questions. The court swells with tales of your poise, your cleverness, your resolve. Your husband, frail but still aware, smiles from his bed and says, "You've grown into something I never imagined." You reply gently, "Neither did I, but in truth you always suspected." Somewhere beneath the girl in the gilded dress, there was someone watching, learning, waiting. And now she has arrived. The wind changes in early autumn. A brittle chill seeps into the corridors, and with it comes a new kind of stillness. Your husband no longer rises from bed. His appetite is gone. His eyes remain closed more than open. The chaplain begins visiting daily, muttering litanies over him while pressing holy oil to his forehead. There is no announcement, no declaration of doom, just a slow, unspoken acknowledgement. The end is near. You sit beside him at dusk, reading softly from the Psalms. He rarely responds. Sometimes his lips twitch, not quite forming words, as if echoing the verses he once knew by heart. His hand, once firm and commanding, now lies limp beside yours. You do not hold resentment. Not now. There's no room for it in this strange, sacred waiting. The court begins to pivot. The advisors gather in quieter corners. Documents are drawn up, sealed, hidden. Nobles arrive suddenly, cloaked in black, under the guise of checking in, but really tallying what pieces of your realm they might claim if things fall apart. You feel the old courtly games tightening their coils again. And this time you are not a girl trapped in the middle. You are the center, the widow-to-be, the regent in waiting. You summon your eldest son. He's 13 now, lean, impatient, hungry for power he barely understands. You sit him down in the solar, the same room where you once wept after your first wedding night. Now it is your place of counsel. You tell him plainly, when your father dies, you will inherit the title. But until you learn to listen, I will rule. He stiffens. His jaw sets. But you see something in his eyes, not defiance, not arrogance, just fear, the kind you once carried. You take his hand, and for the first time in years, speak to him not as a subject, but as a son. You tell him what he cannot yet grasp, that ruling isn't about dominance. It's about endurance, observation, restraint. You promise to teach him, and he, with trembling certainty, nods. Your husband's death comes quietly. No gasping final words, no dramatics. Just a slow, cold morning and an untouched cup of wine. The bells toll at dawn. 3 times, one for his soul, one for his title, one for his legacy. You dress in black, a veil heavy with embroidery draped over your face. Not for grief, but for expectation. Everyone must see you mourning, even if your eyes remain dry. A funeral is a theater. Nobles gather in velvet and fur, speaking in reverent tones, watching you with curious calculation. You've been a wife for nearly half your life. Now they wonder what kind of widow you'll be. Docile, withdrawn, or something else. You walk behind the casket through the chapel nave. Incense clings to your skin. The choir sings of mercy. You keep your gaze forward. No tears, no tremble. Just silence, dense and impenetrable, like armor. After the burial, the murmurs begin. Will she retire to an abbey? Will the boy rule alone? Who truly holds the reins now? You answer them swiftly. At the first council meeting after the funeral, you arrive early. The hall is colder without your husband's presence. The chairs seem too large. The men shift uncomfortably as you take the head seat, not the one beside the throne, but the throne itself. A symbolic move, and intentional. You speak clearly. You outline the next season's provisions, the updated grain tithes, the status of the Northern Watchtower. You correct 2 stewards redirect a tax proposal and reassign a wayward knight who's been abusing his levy. By the time the meeting ends, no one questions who governs this realm now. Regency is supposed to be temporary, a bridge between the old and the new. But you make it something else. A shield, a furnace, a crucible for the next generation. You know what happens when boys are handed crowns too early. You've seen what hunger does when unearned. So you structure your son's rule carefully, slowly, deliberately. In public, you defer. You let him sit higher, speak first. But in private, your voice is the one he leans on. And he listens, truly listens. You find yourself marveling at him sometimes at how his anger softens when you guide him with stories rather than orders. He is not your husband. He does not love power for its own sake. Not yet. You pray it stays that way. Your daughters, too, begin to shift roles. The eldest helps you manage correspondence. The middle is betrothed, but on your terms. Not to some war-hardened relic, but to a boy her age from a house with more books than swords. You visited his estate yourself. You met his mother. You saw in her the same quiet resolve that sits behind your own eyes. Still, nothing lasts untouched. There are threats, always threats. A distant cousin lays claim to a portion of your estate, citing ancient lineage and obscure parchment. He sends an envoy, young smug, certain of your submission. You invite him to dine. He arrives with a small entourage, all men, all armored in polished steel. They expect resistance, hostility. Instead, they find a warm hearth, an elaborate meal, and a widow who quotes his own legal documents back to him in Latin, flawlessly, relentlessly, until his confidence wilts beneath his ceremonial collar. He leaves empty-handed. Later, one of your advisors, an old man who once served your husband, chuckles and says, "I don't know if they feared you more because you were a woman, or because you made it look effortless." You smile. But inside you don't feel powerful, just weary. Because this life is not made of victories. It is made of survival stitched into strategy, of walking hallways that remember your younger broken self and daring to keep walking anyway. You begin dreaming again, not of escape but of peace, of a quiet house far from court, of your children grown and ruling well, of days where your hands hold books, not burden. You do not know if you will live to see that. But the dream, soft and golden, stays with you. And sometimes, when the wind rushes through the high towers and makes the banners ripple like thunder, you swear you hear your own voice in it, older, stronger, unbroken. Still here. Winter returns with a slow vengeance. The wind claws through the cracks in the stone walls, and the hearths burn endlessly just to keep the frost from settling on the draperies. You walk the halls wrapped in wool and velvet, trailing a quiet entourage of maids and guards. Every step echoes. Every silence feels like a memory waiting to be reawakened. The court has settled into a new rhythm now. You at its center, your son beside you, your daughters watching carefully from the wings. There is a calm here, but not peace. Never peace. There's always someone waiting. Another letter, another challenge, another suitor angling for favor. One morning, your steward brings news of a merchant ship seized near your port. Piracy, most likely, though no one dares call it that directly. You send a letter to the coastal governor demanding restitution and inquiry. You write it yourself. Your script is firm, even unmistakably authoritative. No man dictated it. No man needs to. Your youngest daughter brings you tea while you write. She watches you work, head tilted like a sparrow trying to learn flight. She asks why no one challenges you openly. You smile, sip, and say, because they know what happens when they do. It's not pride. It's reality. In your years as regent, you've learned that the fiercest weapon is consistency. You show up. You act with reason. You do not raise your voice, but your voice is remembered. You treat allies with warmth, but never familiarity. You allow men to believe they are leading until they've already gone the way you've marked. There are, of course, rumors. There always are. That you practice old magic. That you poison rivals. That your first child was fathered by someone else. You've heard them all. Some whispered behind your back. Some delivered straight to your face with a smirk and a toast. You never react. You don't need to, because power doesn't tremble when questioned. It tightens. Your eldest son, now nearly 15, is beginning to chafe against your guidance. He wants more say in matters of diplomacy. He wants his seal on treaties, his name on decisions. And though your instincts warn you to be cautious, you also know this is part of the path. If you hold him too tightly, he'll rebel. If you let go too quickly, he'll stumble. So you do the only thing left, teach him in secret how to outwit the world. You begin leaving drafts for him to revise. You ask him to debate with you over tithes, over grain prices, over border patrol. He resists at first, but when you treat him not as a child, but as a mind worth sharpening, he responds, slowly, clumsily, but with sincerity. He still has his father's impatience, but not his blindness. You nurture that, not with flattery, but with pressure. He won't be a kind ruler, not naturally, but he might be a wise one, and in this world, that's rarer than gold. Your second daughter, now 12, begins asking you about her future. Not with desperation, but curiosity. She's clever, possibly the cleverest of your children. She reads maps for fun, studies law instead of poetry. You've never told her she'll be married off, but she knows. She sees the way the ladies at court glance at her now, the way the steward always includes her name when listing the family lineage. You want to protect her. Of all your children, she is the one who sees through the veil without bitterness. But you also know she's the most dangerous in a world that punishes perception. One evening you sit with her near the fire and ask what she wants. She doesn't hesitate. I want to study in the abbey, the one near the cliffs. You nod slow. She adds, not forever, but for a time. I want to learn things I can't hear. You don't cry. But later in your chamber, you allow yourself a long breath you've been holding for months. Because she sees a future. Because she believes she can shape it. Because she asks permission and expects to be heard. and you will make sure she is. There are visits to your court now, regular ones. Envoys, bishops, distant cousins with vague claims and too many titles. They come bearing gifts and half-truths, hoping to charm the aging regent or catch your son in a mistake. You dress carefully for these visits. Nothing ostentatious, always the same palette of soft grays, deep greens, rich blues. You know how to signal respect, but you've also mastered how to assert dominance without a word. The foreign visitors are the most interesting. They speak with flatteries too fine to be genuine. Their eyes flick between you and your son, measuring who wields the real power. Some offer marriage proposals cloaked in diplomacy. You smile. You ask questions. And always you send them home unsettled. There's one, though, who lingers in your mind. A princess from the northern reaches older than your daughter's unmarried bold. She wears no veil. She speaks 3 languages. She refuses to sit in the place they assign her choosing. Instead, a chair near the fire. The 2 of you speak alone one night. You ask her what she wants. She says, "A life I don't have to explain." You look at her for a long time. You see yourself not as you are now, but as you might have been if someone had opened a door instead of closing it. Before she leaves, you press a small parcel into her hand. A rosary. But tucked within the velvet pouch is a folded slip of parchment, a name, a place, a woman you trust. You say nothing, but her eyes shine. And she bows not as a subject, but as an equal. The world beyond your court continues to grind its gears. Wars rise and fall like tides. Epidemics touch villages at the edge of your land. There are famines to manage clergy, to appease retainers, to dismiss quietly when their loyalties fray. You handle it all, not because you love power, but because you know what happens when it slips into the wrong hands. And because deep down you are still a girl in the too heavy gown standing on the edge of a future she couldn't control. You survived it. Now you mold it. The first snow of the season falls as gently as ash, dusting the castle rooftops in a soft white hush. From the highest window of your solar, you watch the landscape transform beneath the silence. The woods vanish beneath a quilt of frost. The courtyards slow. Even the servants speak more quietly, as if winter itself commands reverence. It's in this quiet that you begin to take account. You are nearly 30 now. Strange how the years stack up behind you like books on a shelf. Some spines are worn titles nearly erased. Others gleam untouched as if begging to be opened again. You've borne 5 children, buried one, governed a realm through drought, famine, and 2 failed uprisings. You've survived your husband, held your throne, and outlived nearly every girl who once curtsied beside you at court. And yet you are still here, still veiled in velvet, still measured in glances and whispers, still navigating a world where your survival is praised but never celebrated. Your son is approaching his 16th year. The council begins to murmur about full inheritance, about stepping back, about transition. They do not say you should relinquish power, but they circle the idea like vultures eyeing a meal that hasn't gone cold yet. You nod politely. You host them for feasts. You smile when they speak. But behind your eyes, the calculations never stop. You know the law. Technically, your son may rule in full now, but practically, he's not ready. Not yet. So you propose something new, a shared regency. It's unheard of. radical. But you present it not as a challenge to tradition, but as its evolution. You tell the council he will rule in the light. I will guard the shadows. Some bristle. Others recognize your skill for what it is, a safeguard, not a threat. The vote passes, narrowly, but it passes. Your son receives his signet, his own banner, his own chambers for council. You still attend every meeting. You still draft every letter. But now you do so with his seal beside yours. And this, you realize, is the true art of power, to teach, to release, and still remain. He makes mistakes, of course, trusts the wrong steward, underestimates a bishop, speaks too freely at a banquet. You let him learn within reason. You allow failure where it won't cost lives. And when he comes to you red-faced and ashamed, you tell him gently, a mistake isn't failure unless you repeat it. He grows, day by day, month by month. You watch with a strange mixture of pride and grief, because in his becoming, a part of your rule must fade. And though you prepared for it, even longed for it in your darker hours, the letting go still aches. Your daughters remain close. One is now married, living in a castle only a day's ride away. You exchange letters every week. She writes of books of astronomy, of her own quiet struggles at court. You see your own journey reflected in hers. But there is one crucial difference, she writes with confidence. Not apology, not fear. Your other daughter prepares for the abbey. She is not cloistered forever, just long enough to learn to arm herself with the kind of knowledge you were denied. When she departs, you stand at the gates together. She wears traveling clothes, a satchel slung over one shoulder. She kisses your hand before mounting her horse. I won't disappoint you, she says. You shake your head. You never could. The younger two children remain in your care, still soft-cheeked, still wide-eyed. You read to them at night from the Book of Hours. You sing lullabies even now when no one is listening. Sometimes you even laugh. Yes, laugh. Not the delicate, courtly chuckle you've worn like a mask for years, but real laughter. It slips out unexpectedly during supper, or when your youngest boy mispronounces a Latin word so badly, it becomes a curse in another tongue. The room goes silent when you laugh, and then slowly others join in, because they are learning too that your joy is not dangerous. It is rare and real. But not everything softens. An old noble family, one you once outmaneuvered, sends an envoy with accusations, land disputes, fabricated debts. You meet them in the high council chamber. They expect hesitation. Instead, they find the same woman they once underestimated standing now beside her son, who mirrors her calm. You speak first. He speaks next. By the end of the meeting, the envoy bows and says nothing more. Later, your son admits, I wasn't sure what to say. You smile. Then you listened, which means you led well. You begin to host more gatherings, this time not for politics, but for women. Quiet meetings cloaked in religious discussion or seasonal rites. You teach herbal remedies. You pass along scrolls. You read aloud the letters of queens long dead. Sometimes the youngest girls cry afterward, not out of sadness, but recognition. They see themselves, and you let them. You give them that gift. You start keeping a journal again. Not just ledgers or treaties, but real words, thoughts, truths. One night you write, they wanted a princess. I became something else. Another night, my daughters will inherit more than land. They will inherit my eyes open. and later I do not wish to be remembered for surviving. I wish to be remembered for changing the rules while pretending to follow them. The winter deepens, but you do not feel cold. You walk the corridors without fear. You rest in chambers that no longer feel like cages. You speak to your children not with caution, but clarity. You still wear velvet, yes. Still sign your name with the weight of lineage. But underneath, something freer stirs, not rebellion, legacy. And for the first time in your life, it feels like yours. The spring that follows is the warmest you can remember. The castle gardens explode with color vines curling across stone walls, lilies blooming along the edge of the fountain, where your daughters once floated petals and whispered secrets. The earth seems to breathe again, and for once you do too. Life in the castle softens not from ease, but from rhythm. You have carved order into chaos. Seasons are no longer feared, they are planned for. Hunger is rare. The people under your rule speak your name with a kind of reverent familiarity. Not as the girl who married into power, but as the woman who quietly held it together. The village below the castle is thriving. You make unannounced visits disguised in a hood, though few are fooled anymore. Children run to you with muddy hands and toothless smiles. Mothers curtsy with tired gratitude. Farmers offer eggs and cabbages you gently refuse. You are remembered here not just as the Duchess, but as the one who sent grain during the hard winter, who refused the tax after the storm, who built the clinic when others called it a waste. One afternoon, you pass the old church near the southern field and step inside. It's quiet, still lit with candles from morning mass. You sit alone in the back pew, folding your gloved hands in your lap. You do not speak aloud. You don't need to. The silence is enough. Not the silence of fear like the one that followed you for years, but the silence of having endured, of being here still. When you leave, a young novice nods to you wide-eyed. She reminds you of your daughters. You nod back and wonder if she's ever heard the stories, not the official ones, but the ones the laundry maids tell when the coals have burned low and the needlework is packed away. Back at court, new dramas brew. A neighboring baron's wife has died mysteriously. Poison, they whisper. Your son wants to involve himself. You advise caution. Not every fire needs our water, you say. He doesn't understand at first. But when the Baron accuses the wrong cousin and two other houses erupt in conflict, he begins to see. He's learning. You've seen him stand in rooms you used to command, and now he fills them. Not as a boy in a man's cloak, but as a true ruler. You're no longer needed at every council, but you're still invited, respected, even depended upon. One day he turns to you during a meeting and says, "Mother, what would you advise?" And just like that, the entire room quiets. Not because of fear, but because they know your answer will carry weight. That night, over wine, he asks you when you stopped being afraid. You pause. Then you tell him the fear never leaves. I just stopped letting it choose my words. He nods slowly. He's not you, and you wouldn't want him to be. He hasn't lived your silences, your bargaining, your bruised dignity. But he has grown in your light. And you know he will cast his own. Still, there are reminders of the old world, the one that forged you. A letter arrives from a distant noble house. A young girl, just 12, is being married off to a man she's never met. The match is political, the dowry generous. Her mother writes to you not for permission, but for reassurance. She's frightened, the letter says. She asks if she'll be safe. You sit with that letter longer than most. You remember the heavy weight of the first dress, the ache of that first wedding night, the way the candlelight seemed to mock your tears. You remember not being able to ask anyone anything, and so you write back, not with promises, but with instructions. You tell her what to say, what herbs to bring, what to look for in his eyes. You tell her that no matter what he takes, her mind is her own, her thoughts, her prayers, her name. You sign the letter with your full title, but underneath in small script you add one final line, you are not alone. More and more the letters come. Girls from noble houses, widows, mothers, even a few men, quiet ones, uncertain of the rage they've inherited. They come seeking advice, seeking connection, seeking truth behind the veils. You answer them all. And without fanfare, something strange begins to bloom across the realm trust. Not in royalty, not in thrones, but in the quiet web of women who have endured, and who have finally begun to speak. One morning, your daughter returns from the abbey with a stack of scrolls, women's writings, herbal lore, legal petitions, accounts of childbirth, famine loss, things never recorded by scribes but kept alive in margins and whispers. She lays them before you like offerings. I think we should make them public, she says. Let the girls read them. You study her face, so earnest, so determined. You nod, and together you begin the work of transcribing not history as the world wrote it, but history as women lived it. It will take years, maybe longer. But you no longer measure time in fear. You measure it in change. And the change has already begun. The ink smudges slightly as you turn another page in the dim light of your solar. You and your daughter work quietly side by side, the scratch of quills on parchment, the only sound between you. The manuscripts spread across your table are fragile, scrawled in multiple hands, some elegant, some barely legible. The words are uneven, but their power is undeniable. Testimonies, stories, laments, instructions passed from mother to daughter, from midwife to novice, from widow to child. One scroll begins with a single line. They took my name, but not my memory. You read it aloud, and the silence after lingers like incense. Your daughter doesn't ask for permission to keep going. She simply does. She's inherited your stillness, but not your silence. Her strength isn't in endurance, it's in expression. Watching her, you feel something unspool inside you, something you've carried too long. It's not regret. It's more delicate than that. A quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, her road will be different. You've begun setting aside time each week to gather the younger girls of the court. You call them lessons, but they are more than that. They are undoings. Undoings of fear, of ignorance, of the lies that once made you believe your suffering was sacred. You teach them not just how to curtsy or recite Latin, but how to read a map, how to write their name with confidence, how to recognize when someone speaks to diminish them rather than to teach. You read aloud from the scrolls. The room grows still. Some cry. Some ask questions you were never allowed to ask. You answer every one. And then one day, one of the girls, a quiet, red-haired child, who lost her mother young, brings you a page she's written. It begins with, I do not know who I am yet, but I know I am not small. You take the page. You kiss her forehead. and later you add her words to your growing archive. Outside the walls of your castle, change moves more slowly, but it moves. The priest in your chapel begins preaching more softly about obedience and more fiercely about compassion. The steward no longer ignores the women who come to court with petitions. Your son invites his sisters to witness council meetings not as decoration, but as voices. There is resistance, of course, always. One of your vassals, a stern, blustery lord from the eastern hills, refuses to accept a ruling you issue jointly with your son. He appeals to the bishop, claims too much female influence. You do not scold. You do not threaten. You invite him to dine. The meal is simple, hearty, served in a smaller hall. He arrives expecting grandeur, expecting to be flattered or shamed. Instead, you sit beside your son and listen as he makes his case. When he finishes, you ask one question. What do you fear most? He blinks unprepared. That tradition will collapse, he finally mutters. You lean forward. What if tradition is not what protects us, but what's been used to contain us? He does not reply, but when he leaves, he bows deeper than when he arrived. It is not a victory, not yet. But it is a beginning. The library grows. Your daughter makes copies of the manuscripts for the abbey for other courts. A traveling noblewoman asks for a volume to take back to her realm. You grant it with quiet joy. A ripple has begun, and you, once the girl drowning beneath the weight of your title, are the stone that started it. One night, your younger son crawls into your bed during a thunderstorm. He is too old for it, but you say nothing. You let him curl beside you, his breathing soft and even. As lightning flashes, you hold him close and remember a time when no one held you during storms. You were expected to be brave. But you know now, bravery is not silence. It is choosing to speak through the shaking. He asks you sleepily, "Will I be a good man?" You kiss his forehead and whisper, "If you listen more than you speak and protect more than you take, yes." In the dark, he nods, and in that moment, you believe it. Another letter arrives from your sister. You haven't heard from her in years. The parchment is thin, the writing nervous. She writes of a second marriage arranged by desperate hands, of quiet neglect, of finding your letters hidden in her old chest. "They saved me," she writes. "I read your words when I felt I had none of my own. I wish we had been allowed to speak more sooner." You fold the letter with trembling fingers, and for the first time in many years, you cry. But not from sorrow, from recognition, from reunion, from knowing that the thread between you was never truly severed. You write back immediately, not with formality, but with truth. You tell her that you were afraid too, that the silence wasn't her fault, that you are proud of her survival, and prouder still that she has begun to speak. Your words now reach farther than you ever imagined. They cross borders, generations, silences. They do not wear crowns, but they hold more power than any coronet ever gave you. You spend more time in the chapel, not in confession, but in contemplation. You sit with your past selves, the girl, the bride, the mother, the regent, and you thank them, each one of them, for surviving, for building. Because it was never just about what you endured. It was about what you passed on. The high summer sun glows through the stained glass windows, painting red and gold across the flagstones. You sit in the chapel gallery alone, the rest of the court still at their midday meal. The heat makes the air heavy, almost still, as if the castle itself is holding its breath. You close your eyes and listen not for voices or movement, but for the soft hum that's always lived beneath it, all the hum of history of time. You are 32 now, not old, not young, just steady. A woman not defined by what she once was, but by what she chose to become. The court still runs with its usual dances and dramas. Matches are made, harvests calculated, threats assessed. You are still at the center of it, but no longer because you must be. Now you are there because you choose to be. You no longer feel watched. You feel seen. Your son now leads many of the councils himself. His voice has grown deeper, his choices sharper. When he makes errors, they are his alone. And when he succeeds, he still sends for you afterward, not to boast, but to reflect. There's a trust between you that no crown could forge. It came from long nights of shared burdens, from the years he saw you carry more than you should have, and never once falter. Your daughters continue to astonish you. The eldest, now a mother herself, writes regularly her letters filled with questions you once had no one to ask. She speaks of sleepless nights of worry, of wonder. She tells you she hears your voice when she soothes her baby, not in words, but in rhythm, in steadiness. I understand now, she wrote recently, all that you never said. Your middle daughter sends pages of copied scrolls, new ones, writings from women you've never met. A widow who taught herself Greek to read ancient texts. A healer who recorded every child's birth she witnessed. A servant girl's testimony after escaping an abusive master. You read their words by lamplight, your fingers tracing the lines as if touching them might pull their voices into the room with you. They aren't royalty. They're not in the lineage books, but they matter, and you will make sure they're remembered. The youngest still in your care asks the most unexpected questions. What happens to people who never want to marry? Do you think God listens to girls faster than boys? Why do we kneel to pray but stand when we speak to kings? You never laugh. You never correct. You answer honestly, even when the answer is simply, I don't know. You find that these conversations fill you more than banquets ever did. And outside your household, the ripple of your work continues. That book you and your daughter began copying, the one of women's writings, herbal remedies, confessions, dreams. It's being requested now, copied by scribes in abbeys, discussed in courts. Some call it dangerous. Some call it revolutionary. You don't care what they call it. You care that girls are reading it, that they are beginning to see themselves not as decorations or extensions of men, but as complete, as thinking, feeling, enduring things. That they might grow up knowing that silence is not safety and obedience is not holiness. You receive a letter from a nobleman in another realm, short, stiff, awkward. He writes on behalf of his daughter. She refuses marriage, refuses to speak. She spends hours by the fire clutching a worn copy of your book. He is angry, confused. What has she read, he asks. What has she learned? You do not reply with an apology. You send a single sentence. She has learned the truth, my lord. Let her speak it when she's ready. He never writes back. But 6 months later, you hear that the girl was sent to study at the same abbey as your daughter once did. That is enough. Meanwhile, politics stir, always. Whispers of succession, foreign alliances. A marriage proposal for one of your nieces too young, too thin, too scared. The same pattern like a song you've grown too tired to dance to. But this time something different happens. The girl refuses, publicly, openly. And for the first time, the court does not laugh. They do not scold. They pause. They wait. Because your name is behind her. You do not raise a banner. You do not issue threats. But you meet with her privately. You ask her to explain. She does with shaking hands, but clear eyes. You ask her what she wants. She whispers a life, and you nod, because you remember whispering the same thing once into a pillow, too soaked with tears to answer back. The council denies the marriage, cites diplomacy, offers the excuse of poor timing. But you know the truth, she won, and more than that, she was allowed to win. The world is not remade overnight, but cracks form, and through them light enters. You continue to write. Your archive grows. It is no longer just the voices of women long gone. It is current, alive. A breathing testament of what was once endured in silence now said aloud. You know some will resist. Some will try to erase it, mock it, twist it. But there are too many eyes open now, too many girls asking, why not me? Too many women remembering what they were forced to forget. And in the quiet of your chamber, beneath tapestries that once felt like walls, you look out the narrow window at the moon rising over your lands. You remember the first time you saw that moon from this same bed. You were a child, a bride, a prisoner. Now you are none of those. Now you are the record keeper, the storyteller, the flame. The late summer harvest festival arrives with a vibrancy that startles you. The castle, usually cloaked in hushed protocols and careful manners, is suddenly bursting with laughter music and garlands of wildflowers. Peasants and nobles alike gather in the courtyard, the lines between them briefly blurred by wine and dancing. You stand at the gallery watching the scene unfold like a painting come to life. Years ago, you would have watched with a practiced smile flanked by attendants, your fingers clenched around the rail. Now you walk among them, lightly veiled, yes, but unguarded. Children tug at your sleeves to show you their painted ribbons. Women bow with the kind of affection that comes not from fear, but from respect. Some of them remember the first spring you ruled alone when the granaries nearly emptied, and you rationed bread with your own hand. A young girl not more than 8 offers you a bundle of herbs tied with string. She doesn't speak, just looks up with wide eyes and hope. You take it with both hands and whisper, "Thank you." You know she'll remember that moment. And more importantly, she'll remember that you did. Later that evening, as the sky bleeds orange and lavender, your family gathers in the great hall for the feast. Your son now sits at the high table, not as a prince, but as a ruler. Your daughters are scattered among the guests, one holding a scroll, another telling riddles to a group of visiting pages. The youngest balances a plum on her forehead to make the others laugh. You do not stop her. You laugh too. There's a lightness to it all that once felt impossible. The weight you carried for so long has lessened not because the world has changed entirely, but because you helped it tilt just a little. Enough to shift the next generation's feet toward firmer ground. You find yourself drifting in thought as the meal progresses, remembering the first time you sat in this hall as a bride. The terror, the ache, the whispered prayers beneath your breath. That girl feels like someone else now, distant, almost unreal, but not forgotten. No, she is still part of you. The part that clenched her jaw during a forced procession. The part that watched others decide her life and vowed silently, "I will remember this." The part that said nothing when it was expected to scream, but who built a future with her silence. You excuse yourself before dessert. Not out of fatigue, but necessity. In your private chamber, lit only by a single candle, you take out the journal you began years ago, the one you never showed anyone. You've filled it slowly in ink faded by time and oil from your fingertips. Pages of reflections, lessons, fears, hopes. Tonight, you begin a new entry. This is no longer a record of pain. It is a testament. Not to survival, but to transformation. I am not simply the woman who endured. I am the woman who watched endurance become power. You pause, then write, "They said the world would not listen, but it has begun to." There is a knock at the door. One of your ladies in waiting enters out of breath and smiling. The envoy from the Southern Isles, she says, wishes to meet you personally. His sister has read your collection. She says it changed her. She's begun teaching girls to read. You close the book gently and rise. When you enter the receiving room, the envoy, tall, reserved, clearly cautious, bows lower than necessary. You recognize the pattern now. Those who carry genuine respect rarely speak first. He presents a gift, a folded square of silk embroidered with words in his native tongue. He explains, it reads, "Where women lead, the walls do not crumble, they breathe." You feel something swell in your chest, something between pride and sorrow, something that defies name. You take the cloth, trace the stitches, and say, "Tell your sister she is not alone. She never was." And this is the refrain that follows you now, the one that echoes wherever your letters, your books, your teachings travel. She is not alone. The phrase has become something larger than you, written in door frames, carved into birch bark, whispered in hallways. A shield, a spark, a promise. You begin to receive visitors, not nobles, not clergy, but girls, women, widows, sisters. They arrive quietly, ask only for your time, and you give it. In the orchard, in the garden chapel, in the old herb room turned library. You listen more than you speak. One girl, barely 16, tells you she taught her younger brothers to read because no one thought she was worth schooling. Another recites a poem she wrote about being unseen. Another brings you the still warm loaf she baked herself with her mother's last flour. They ask for nothing in return, only that you hear them. And you do. Every word. There are critics, of course. A new bishop arrives and warns that too much literacy among women could disrupt the natural order. You meet with him privately. You hand him a copy of your daughter's collected writings. You smile and you say, "If the order is just, it will survive the truth." He says nothing. But the next week, his sermons are noticeably quieter, less rigid, more forgiving. The tide continues. Your archive is now bound, hundreds of pages, titled not with your name but with the simple phrase, "Testimonies of the Forgotten." It's distributed by scribes across the continent, hidden in the folds of other books, shelved in abbeys, quoted by noblewomen, read aloud in markets, discussed in whispers and increasingly in open conversation. Some still sneer, but more listen. And this was your legacy all along. Not the gowns or the titles or the seat, the high table, but the voice you grew in silence and taught others to find. Autumn arrives again, crisp and gold. The orchard glows with the last of the season's fruit, and the leaves fall like prayers across the castle grounds. You walk slower now, not from weakness, but from choice. You've earned the right to linger. The world no longer demands your urgency. It respects your presence. You are no longer the flame trying not to flicker. You are the hearth around which others gather. The castle has grown quieter in your daily life. Your son rules fully now, his court vibrant with youth and ambition. He consults you less often, but never from disregard. When you speak, he listens, but he speaks more, and you listen back. You've guided him well, and now he's finding his own rhythm. He's married recently. His bride is sharp-eyed and deliberate, older than most expected. She reminds you of your middle daughter, measured, curious, unwilling to shrink. When she entered the court, the noblewomen studied her with silent skepticism. Now many of them follow her lead. You meet her alone one morning in the inner garden. She offers you a sprig of rosemary for remembrance, she says. Then she adds, "I've read your book 3 times." You nod, smiling. "I wrote it for you, even before I knew your name." She asks how you survived it all. You say, "I didn't survive. I shaped it." And for a moment the garden is silent, not from fear, not from formality, but from reverence. A passing of something deeper than title, a kind of torch, warm and weightless. Your daughters visit more often now. The eldest brings her children, bright-eyed, muddy-kneed, and fearless. You let them climb onto your lap, muss your sleeves, beg stories from your mouth. You do not read from the psalter. You read them your own words, your own memories. One asks grandmother, "Were you always brave?" You answer, "No." But I always remembered. They don't understand yet, but one day they will. Your middle daughter returns from her travels with manuscripts and ideas. She plans to start her own school just for girls. She wants to name it after your mother, the one who taught you the Psalms but not the escape. You do not blame her. You simply say, make it a place where no one forgets how to speak. Your youngest, now nearly grown, prepares for her own chapter. She is different from the rest. Less interested in politics, more drawn to the healing arts. You encourage her. Let her study with the herbalist. You send her to a midwife known for treating noblewomen gently with dignity. She returns with blood on her apron and joy in her eyes. I delivered a child, she says, and the mother didn't cry. You nod slowly. That's the power of gentleness. The archive continues to grow. What began as a collection of secrets has become something sacred. Women now send you their writings without invitation. A duchess writes of surviving 5 sons lost to war. A washerwoman describes the bruises she paints over with ash so her daughter won't see. A nun confesses that the silence of the cloister never erased the memory of her sister's screams on her wedding night. You read them all. You preserve them all. You answer every single one. And still there are critics. There always will be. A duke writes to your son, urging him to restrain the influence of women at court. He suggests that too much softness threatens the crown. Your son reads the letter aloud at supper. Then, without raising his voice, he says, "My mother's softness carved this kingdom from the inside out. I will not insult her by pretending otherwise." You say nothing. You don't need to. There are moments of quiet now that you didn't used to have. Hours in which you sit by the window sipping spiced wine, reading by candlelight. You reread the book of Judith, the Psalms, your own journals. You find a line from your early writings one day. Someone will say my name, not in pity, but in pride. You trace it with your fingertip. It's already come true. One morning, the abbess from the Cliffside Abbey sends a gift. A bound volume elegantly stitched. It's your writings. Copied, illuminated with margins full of commentary by the students. In different hands, they've underlined sentences. This helped me. This was me. This taught me I am not a sin. You run your fingers over the vellum and your eyes blur. You do not feel pride. You feel peace. You begin drafting your final letters, not of farewell, but of legacy. You write to your daughters, your sons, your daughters-in-law, your nieces. You include poems, proverbs, recipes, instructions for quiet revolutions. You write, teach the girls to question. Teach the boys to wait for answers. Let none of them believe silence is strength unless it is chosen. You don't send them yet, but they are ready. Your hair is streaked with white now. Your hands are slower, but your mind as sharp as ever. Your memory holds generations. Your voice, now gentler, holds authority no one questions. Sometimes the ladies of court ask you what you think heaven will be. You answer honestly, a garden full of girls who never had to fear their own stories, and they nod. Because by now they know that your words aren't metaphors. They are seeds, and they are growing everywhere. The first frost arrives like a whisper. It clings to the courtyard stones and silvers the hedges overnight. The castle wakes slowly now. There's no more urgency, only rhythm. Your days are quieter, but no less full. You rise with the sun, not to attend council or sign edicts, but to write, to read, to listen. There is a strange freedom in being a woman who is no longer watched with expectation. They call you the matron of the realm now. You smile at the title. It's not a crown, but it's earned. No one pities you anymore. And you in turn no longer fear being forgotten. You've ensured it. The book, The Testimonies of the Forgotten, has been translated into 4 languages. Some copies are burned in distant courts. Others are read in secret behind convent walls. But many more are read aloud, in halls like yours, passed hand to hand, annotated with soft pencil and bright ink, by girls who don't yet know the price you paid for every page. And that's the way it should be. You receive one final letter from your sister. She writes from a coastal manor now, her second marriage long behind her, her sons grown. She is comfortable, happy even. But it's the end of the letter that grips you most. I have begun teaching the village girls how to write. I use your name. They all want to be you. You fold the letter against your chest and sit in stillness for a long while. It is snowing when your youngest returns from her apprenticeship. She's not a child anymore. Her cloak is heavy, her hands strong. She kneels when she enters your chamber, and you laugh, pulling her into your arms. She smells of lavender and vinegar and knowledge. I brought you something, she says. It's a small leather pouch frayed at the edges. Inside is a bone-handled pen. It belonged to the midwife. She said it should go to the woman who taught her what gentleness could do. You keep it beside your journal. Your grandchildren run through the halls, now clattering through chambers once ruled by silence. No one scolds them. You taught your children better than that. You watch one of them, your daughter's youngest, pause in the gallery, gaze up at the great family tapestry. It's been updated, not with battles or bloodlines, but with images of the women. You, your daughters, their daughters. You aren't smiling in the embroidery. You are standing, book in one hand, a branch in the other. The child turns to you and asks, "Is that really what you looked like?" You crouch beside her and whisper, "It's what I became." The castle in its age has softened, cracks filled with moss, stones warmed by the sun. You walk slower now, and only when you choose. The courtiers part for you, not from fear, from reverence. Sometimes younger women ask you for stories. You no longer need to measure your words. You tell them everything. The weight of a wedding gown that didn't fit. The sting of first blood on cold linen. The terror of speaking too loudly. The cost of whispering too little. And they listen. Because they must. You give your last public address in the chapel where you once wept on the eve of your marriage. It's a gathering of women from all corners of the realm. They wear no matching crests. They carry no swords, but they are warriors, every one. Some are noble. Some are daughters of bakers, scribes, shepherds. You recognize the same fire in all of them. You speak plainly. You say, "I was once told that a woman's silence is her virtue, but I have learned that silence is only holy when it is chosen. And choice, real sacred choice, is the holiest power of all." When you finish, they rise as one. It is not applause, it is a rising. In your final winter, you spend most mornings by the window. The sky is always pale, the snow always whispering. You do not count your years. You count the echoes, the books, the girls who walk taller, the sons who listen better, the nights no longer feared, the corridors no longer haunted. Your children visit often. You speak little. You've said everything that matters. Now your words live in others, and that is enough. On your last evening, you ask to be left alone. You light a candle. You sit at your desk. You open your journal to the first page. The handwriting is shaky, childish. It reads, "I am afraid." Below it in mature script, you write, "I was too." But I kept walking. You close the book. You lay down. And the wind rushing through the towers sounds like laughter, like footsteps, like the voices of girls free at last to speak. Let your breath slow now. You've walked a long way through these corridors, haven't you? Through stone chambers and echoing halls, through pages of a life once sealed tight behind gilded gates and locked expectations. But now the doors have opened. You've seen what lay behind the tapestries and under the silk, fear, strength, silence, and fire. You've worn the dress, felt its weight, watched the world from behind the veil, and now it's time to set it all down. Let the story rest inside you, not as a burden, but as a seed. One that understands where strength comes from, not just from crowns or titles, but from small, unseen acts of resistance. A whispered prayer, a letter tucked into a book, a refusal to disappear. You've stood beside a girl who became a princess who became a woman who became a voice. And tonight, her voice became yours. So now, as the candles dim and the air grows still, breathe deeply. Feel the warmth in your chest. and imagine the world she left behind, not the one of fear, but of freedom. A garden of girls with open hands, open eyes, and no need to whisper their truths. Let that garden grow in your sleep. Let it bloom.